This is about to be something you won't forget. A moment that'll grab you by the collar and drag you into the center of the storm. Because what happened at UFC Fight Night 255 wasn't just another night of fights. It was a night that flipped expectations upside down, shattered dreams, and raised questions no one saw coming. And if you think you already know what went down, trust me, you're only scratching the surface. Because in the chaos of London's O2 Arena, stories unfolded that will shape careers, end legacies, and possibly change the very landscape of the sport. Stay with me till the end, because the answer you came here for, you're going to get it. But not before I take you through every single moment that mattered, every unexpected twist that left the crowd gasping, and every consequence that fighters will have to face moving forward. This isn't just about wins and losses. This is about survival, about redemption, and about one haunting question. What happens when the unthinkable becomes reality? Let's start with the moment that turned a routine undercard fight into something people will be talking about for a long, long time. You know that fight everyone thought would be the perfect time to step away, grab a drink, maybe check their phone? Yeah, that one. The fight between Shauna Bannon and Pooja Tomar wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just another matchup on the prelims, two fighters trying to make a name for themselves. But then it happened. The kind of moment that makes people leap out of their seats, eyes wide, mouths open in disbelief. Bannon was done. Over. Flat on the mat after eating a head kick so perfect, so clean that it looked like her night was over. The referee could have stepped in, and no one would have complained. Tomar had delivered what should have been a fight-ending moment. But Bannon? She wasn't having it. Somehow, in a moment that defied all logic, all expectations, she clawed her way back. Stunned, barely hanging on, she grabbed Tamar's arm and locked in an armbar so quick, so precise, that before anyone could even process what was happening, it was over. Tomar tapped, and Bannon, who should have been unconscious just seconds before, was standing with her arm raised. Think about that for a second. One moment, she's out. The next, she's winning. If you don't think that deserves to be in the comeback of the year conversation, you weren't watching the same fight as the rest of us. But let's not pretend this was some flawless masterpiece. Let's be real. This was a fight between two competitors who, at the highest levels, still have work to do. A more polished fighter would have ended it with that head kick. A more experienced grappler wouldn't have let the armbar happen. And yet none of that matters. Because what we saw wasn't perfection. It was raw, unfiltered resilience. The kind of moment that reminds us why we watch this sport in the first place. Now, let's switch gears. Because while Bannon was fighting for her life inside the cage, someone else was quietly realizing their time in the sport might be up. Marcin Tybura, a name that's been part of the UFC's heavyweight landscape for what feels like an eternity, stepped into the octagon for what could very well be his last fight under the UFC banner. He did what he does best, shutting down the hype of Mick Parkin, a younger, fresher prospect who thought he was about to make a name for himself. But Tybura wasn't about to be a stepping stone. He outworked Parkin, controlled him, and won a clear decision. And yet, it didn't feel like a victory. Because here's the problem. Tybura is consistent, durable, and always competitive. But he's never been the guy. Never been a knockout artist. Never been a dominant force. And when you look at the UFC's heavyweight division where finishes are everything, where highlight reels matter, Tybura's style isn't exactly what the promotion is looking for. He doesn't have a single knockdown in his UFC career. Think about that. 22 fights, and not once has he put an opponent on the canvas with a punch. It doesn't mean he isn't good. It just means he isn't marketable. And in a sport where marketability can mean the difference between staying and being shown the door, Tybura's future is suddenly uncertain. The UFC knows what they have in him. A solid veteran. A reliable name. A test for up-and-coming fighters. But is that enough? Or is this the end of the road? That's the uncomfortable question hanging over his head right now. And the truth is, no matter how much he's given to the sport, the answer might not be the one he wants to hear. And then there's Molly McCann, a fighter who didn't just lose, she walked away. Molly was never a champion, but she was a presence, a personality, a fighter who carried the weight of British MMA on her shoulders at times. Can he climb back? Can he rebuild? It's possible, but it won't be easy. The welterweight division isn't waiting for him to find his rhythm again. The Sharks are circling, and Edwards has to fight like his career depends on it, because in many ways, it does. And then there's Carlos Ulberg. On paper, he did everything right. He won. He beat a former champion. He extended his streak. But let's be honest, winning isn't always enough. The way you win matters. And his fight against John Blachowicz, it wasn't the kind of performance that makes people demand you get a title shot. The fight lacked urgency. It lacked those moments of brilliance that make people sit up and say, that's the guy. And in a division where names like Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev exist, you can't just win, you have to make a statement. Ulberg wants a title shot, but has he really earned it? That's the debate now. He has the skills. He has the momentum. But does he have the presence, the ability to make people believe he's the next champion? Right now, the answer is uncertain. What happens next for him will be critical. If he wants to fight for the belt, he needs one more performance, a performance that leaves no doubt. Because right now, the UFC isn't just looking for winners. They're looking for stars. And speaking of careers at a crossroads, let's go back to Marcin Tybura. He's done everything a fighter can do to prove he belongs. 22 fights in the UFC. 14 wins. A veteran who has stood the test of time. But now, he finds himself in a place no fighter wants to be uncertain of his future. The truth is, the UFC is a business. And in this business, being good isn't always enough. Excitement sells. Knockouts sell. And Tybura, for all his skill and consistency, has never been the guy who puts people on the edge of their seats. So what happens now? Will the UFC re-sign him? Or will they let him walk, letting his legacy end somewhere outside of the octagon? If this was just about skill, the answer would be obvious. Keep him. He's still top 15. He's still competitive. But the UFC doesn't always work that way. And for Tybura, that means his fate is now in the hands of the matchmakers. And finally, we come back to Molly McCann. Her retirement wasn't shocking. It wasn't even controversial. It was honest. She knew. She knew the game had passed her by. She knew that getting submitted in the first round by someone who had 8 days to prepare wasn't just a loss, it was a sign. A sign that it was time to walk away. But if there's one thing that will define her legacy, it's this: she did it her way. She fought with heart. She carried the hopes of an entire country. She was never the best, never the most dominant, but she was beloved. And when it was time to go, she left with dignity. Not everyone gets to do that. So where does that leave us? With questions. Can Leon Edwards recover from this nightmare stretch of losses? Can Sean Brady keep this momentum and become the next welterweight champion? Will the UFC give Carlos Ulberg the title shot he wants, or make him prove himself one more time? And for the fighters who left it all in the cage, what happens now? One thing is certain, UFC Fight Night 255 wasn't just another event. It was a night that changed careers. A night that raised doubts. A night that answered some questions while leaving us with even bigger ones. And for the fighters who walked away in victory or defeat, one reality remains: nothing is guaranteed. In this sport, you're only as good as your last fight. And the future? That's up to them. Because the UFC doesn't wait. It moves forward. And if you can't keep up, you get left behind. The question is, who's ready to fight for their place in the spotlight? Because the next chapter is coming. And only the strongest will survive.